skyline. We are going to continue not only talking about the White House, but all of the international angles involving President Trump, the Russia-Ukraine war, the Gaza war, and many, many more headlines as well. The first one I want to talk about right now specifically is the story that we're going to be tracking very closely come next Friday. That's the meeting in Alaska between President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy on Saturday rejecting the idea that his country would give up land to end the war with Russia after President Trump suggested a peace deal could include, quote, some swapping of territories. Zelenskyy said that Ukraine will not give Russia any awards for what it has done and that Ukrainians will not give their land to the occupier. This comes ahead of Putin and Trump's high-stakes meeting in Alaska next week, set to take place on Friday once again. Host of the Strap podcast, Hal Kempfer, is here. Hal, should Zelenskyy have cause for concern that he won't be in Alaska?
Oh, he already has said he has cause for concern. Austin, I got to tell you, it's really interesting to see how this rolled out. The Europeans also have cause for concern. They want to be there. This is going to be Trump and Putin meeting in Alaska and one-on-one, no Ukrainian representation, no European representation. And it's already been prefaced with the idea that there might be a land swap involved, that there might be some ceding of sovereign Ukrainian territory. And of course, President Zelenskyy has come out quite forcefully and saying, hey, that's a non-starter. And obviously it's very different than the agreement on the table, because what's been on basically on the table for months and months and months has been an immediate ceasefire. And the immediate ceasefire means stop, and you stop where you are, and there's no more taking a territory. One thing that a lot of people may not realize is, yes, Russia is in 4 oblasts or 4 provinces that they're still contesting. Crimea they control, but the other 4 they're still contesting, and they don't have 100% of the territory. They're still fighting for territory, trying to take towns. So if there was a deal where they took these 4 oblasts or these 4 provinces, that would mean the Ukrainian troops would literally be pulling back from territory that they've been defending with a lot of Ukrainian blood, and giving it to the Russians. And of course, that is it's not something that's permitted in the Ukrainian constitution for them to do something like that. And there's a lot of problems they would have politically within Ukraine for doing something like that. But what that would do is they give Putin something that he could point to and say, see, I've lost over 1 million Russian men fighting this war, and I've gained these territories that he believes are intrinsically part of Russia.
Can you expand on why Europe is going to be watching this meeting closely?
Well, this is all about European security. I mean, I hate to be too realpolitik on this, but I'm going to be realpolitik, which is if Russia is tied up in a war with Ukraine, then there's no Russian military resources that could go fight somewhere else, like against a NATO country like the Baltic states. So frankly, for Europe and for NATO, the best thing is to keep supporting Ukraine. And of course, the best of all things would be for Russian units and for the Russian army to be militarily defeated on the battlefield in Ukraine. That would be the best of all things. But to keep them tied up, one of the things that Putin has done is he's transitioned the entire Russian economy to supporting this war effort. And the problem he has is if this war was to end, he either is going to face a massive recession turning into a depression with a lot of angry, disgruntled Russian veterans, war veterans on the streets of Moscow and St. Petersburg, and then newly laid off defense workers also on the streets of these major cities. And that's a very combustible thing, as you can imagine, politically speaking, in Russia. Or he keeps doing this war thing. But if he keeps doing the war production thing, then he's got to turn his sights into something else. And if you're sitting in Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia, you know exactly what he's got his sights set on. So NATO and Europe, especially Eastern Europe, they don't want to see something where Russia becomes a bigger threat to them.
So this week, President Trump suggested that a peace deal could include some swapping of territories. Hal, what's the most likely outcome here? If Ukraine ain't gonna cede territory, how tall of a task will it be to get Russia to stop the offensive?
Well, we could end up with a stalemate situation. It really it's what's going on in President Trump's mind on this one. If he really believes that a territorial swap is going to do something, now I tell you, from a Ukrainian perspective, from a European perspective, and from a perspective of many national security experts across, bipartisan across the United States, is that that would just be a temporary stopping point if there was swapping a territory. If he took those four, Zaporizhia, Kherson, the two Donbass oblasts, if he took those completely, that would simply be a waiting game until he could build up forces militarily to go in and take the rest of Ukraine. That would it's not, there would be no permanent peace. And that's why when you listen to President Zelenskyy, he talks about a lasting peace. Well, a lasting peace is one where Russia is not going to go and invade Ukraine again. And there's nothing that this would not stop Russia from trying to invade again. Definitely wouldn't stop Russia from looking at doing something in the Baltic states, which would pull it into NATO. By the way, I would mention that all around Putin, there have been numerous officials that have talked about going up against NATO or doing something in the Baltic. So this is something that's been on the table that the Kremlin actually put out, was this idea of going against NATO directly, and they tend to saber rattle against NATO on a pretty regular basis. So it doesn't do much. But what could happen is they have this meeting, and they say, okay, we're going to maybe do a territorial swap. Zelenskyy says no, absolutely no, which is what he's saying now. And the European countries, the European Union, probably Mark Rutte at NATO, representing the voices of the European countries, and certainly you'd probably hear Macron, Starmer, Merrick would all go up, or Mertz would all sit there and say, no, don't give up territory, in which case there'd be a complete stalemate. And this would have been essentially for nothing. So that's a very likely outcome of whatever happens in Alaska.
Here at LiveNOW, we work with live feeds all the time. And guess what? We just got a live feed in, and our understanding, our edge partners are telling us that there may be another Trump roof walk in the cards coming up here in the interim. We'll keep watching this, Hal. I don't know exactly when we'll see the president step out, but we might remember earlier this week the president was surveying the White House grounds from the White House roof. We'll try and bring live vantage points of the president when he steps out. I got to ask you, we're talking about a meeting in Alaska in 6 days from now, something that you and I are going to be watching pretty closely. But I think one of the big questions on everybody's mind about this, why Alaska, Hal? Why?
I got to tell you, when we were talking about this some days back, I didn't see a meeting in the United States. I just didn't see Putin coming to the United States, and they kind of split the difference. He didn't come to the continental United States. He went to the periphery, if you will. They're going to Alaska. Now, one of the reasons is geography. It's just across the Bering Straits. It's very close. That's where, literally Alaskan territory or U.S. territory and Russian territory, that's where they kind of meet. They're right across that narrow strip of water. And so I found that rather interesting that they decided to use Alaska. If they were going to use another place, I would have guessed, if they said U.S. territory, I would have guessed probably the Northern Mariana Islands on Saipan would be another place that they could have done that. But it is a meeting. It is on U.S. territory. I think what happened is they probably went through other types of venues like Turkey or the UAE or something, and they started running into problems with those venues. Could have been political, could have been security issues, could have been a number of different things. Could have been just the compressed amount of time to pull something like this off. And so they may have just, the decision could have been made, well, let's meet in Alaska. We control that territory. We control the situation. Also, it's very remote. That's another thing, too. Unlike those other two places I just talked about, it's difficult if someone was going to do something nefarious, a security threat. Alaska is a tougher area to work in. It's tougher for them to get into, particularly if it's on a military base or anywhere in Alaska for that matter. It'd be tough for any known terrorist groups or anyone else try to do something there. just because the geography and the distances and a lot of other things would make it rather daunting. So there are a lot of reasons why Alaska would work, but geography and just the location itself, the venues, kind of lend themselves to this.
Maybe we'll see the first ever bilateral meeting on the Diomede Islands, Hal. I got to say, we have lots to cover with Hal tonight. We're going to be talking about the Middle East. We're going to be talking about Azerbaijan and Armenia. We're also going to be discussing the idea of U.S. troops being deployed in Mexico. It's an idea, and it's something that's worth talking about. Before we get into all that, though, I want to play out Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. He posted a 2-minute-long segment on Twitter earlier today. He's pretty much reacting to the Trump-Putin meeting in Alaska. Let's play a little bit of this out before we hit a commercial break.
Шановні українці, українки, президент Трамп оголосив про підготовку своєї зустрічі з Путіним на Алясці. Дуже далеко від цієї війни, яка триває на нашій землі, проти нашого народу, яку все одно не закінчити без нас, без України. Путін не вірив в наших людей, тому ухвалив це своє безнадійне рішення спробувати взяти Україну. Це було його головною помилкою – не зважати на українців. Я вірю в наших людей, бо українці сильні, українці захищають своє. Багато хто в світі став на бік України за час війни. Навіть ті, хто з Росією, знають, що вона чинить зло. Звісно, ми не дамо Росії нагород за зроблене. Український народ заслуговує на мир. Але всі партнери мають розуміти, що таке достойний мир. Цю війну треба закінчувати, і Росія має її закінчити. Росія її почала та затягує, не слухаючи ніякі дедлайни. І саме це проблема, а не щось інше. Відповідь на українське територіальне питання є вже в Конституції України. Відступати від цього ніхто не буде і не зможе. Дарувати свою землю окупанту українці не будуть. Україна готова до реальних рішень, які можуть дати мир. Будь-які рішення, які проти нас, будь-які рішення, які без України, вони одночасно і рішення проти миру. Вони нічого не дадуть. Це мертві рішення. Вони ніколи не спрацюють. А нам усім потрібен реальний, живий мир, який люди будуть поважати. Ми готові разом з президентом Трампом, разом з усіма нашими партнерами працювати заради реального і, головне, тривалого миру. Миру, який не розвалиться через бажання Москви. Я дякую всім нашим людям за те, що ми разом. Україна є. Дякую всім нашим воїнам за те, що ми зберегли незалежність. Стійте міцно. Це наша земля. Ми – це Україна. Слава Україні!
Okay, lots more international headlines to get to. We're going to be back with